Now that you have an understanding of how the ignition system functions, our attention will turn to some ignition system troubleshooting. The first step in troubleshooting an ignition system is usually a spark test. For engines with CD ignition, use the spark tester specified in the engine service manual. Disconnect the spark plug lead from the spark plug and attach the tester to the lead. Attach the tester spring clip to a good ground, not the spark plug. On twin-cylinder engines, leave the other spark plug lead attached to the spark plug or securely connected to ground. Make sure all drives are disengaged or turned off and the ignition switch is turned on. Crank the engine and observe the firing tip of the tester. A crisp blue spark should be seen. If not, further testing of the system will be necessary. Testing of the ignition components used on K-Series engines with breaker point systems is covered in detail in Kohler Form TP-2210-A, titled Engine Electrical Systems. Although there are several solid-state ignition system types, some common tests can be used regardless of system. These basic steps will be discussed here. However, always follow specific testing procedures for each engine. If the ignition is not producing an acceptable spark, the next step in troubleshooting a suspected ignition system problem is to isolate the engine from the remainder of the equipment on which the engine is mounted. This is done by locating the plug connectors between the engine and the equipment. Remove the white kill wire from the engine connector. Reconnect the plug and position the connector on the white wire so it cannot touch ground. Keep in mind that on most systems, the ignition switch will not stop the engine after removing the white wire from the connector. Before attempting to start the engine, make sure all drives are turned off and the brakes are set. Locate a ground near the white wire, or have a jumper wire available to ground the white wire to stop the engine. Engines equipped with Smart Spark require a battery voltage supply to operate. On these engines, turning the ignition switch to off will shut off the voltage supply to the SAM, stopping the engine. Attempt to start the engine. If the engine starts, the equipment wiring and controls are suspected as the problem. If the engine does not start or run properly, continue to focus troubleshooting on engine systems. Continue by testing secondary leads for spark. Use the specified spark tester in place of the spark plug and crank the engine. On twin-cylinder engines, be sure both spark plug leads are grounded through testers, spark plugs, or directly to ground. The ignition modules will be permanently damaged if secondary circuits are open when cranking the engine. When cranking the engine, make sure cranking speed is at least 550 to 600 RPM when performing spark tests. If spark tests are good, but the engine starts or runs poorly, continue by replacing the spark plugs.